He saw the lights and sighed, not with the jolt of fear a civilian feels, but with the weary annoyance of a man interrupted. Officer Jack Riley glanced in the rearview mirror of his Mustang, the flashing blue and red lights painting his face in strobing hues of authority and consequence. He wasn't worried. He had a card for this, a universal key that opened the lock of any inconvenient traffic stop. He had a badge. He pulled over to the shoulder of the long, sun-bleached stretch of I-75, the asphalt shimmering with heat, and killed the engine. He watched as the state patrol cruiser, a sleek, formidable black and white, pulled in behind him. The trooper who stepped out was tall, built like he was carved from the very bedrock of the Appalachian Mountains he patrolled. He moved with a quiet, deliberate economy that spoke of years of discipline. His uniform was immaculate, his posture ramrod straight. He didn't swagger, he flowed, a river of calm authority in a world of chaotic currents. As he approached the driver's side window, Riley could see the man's face, etched with lines that weren't from age but from focus. His eyes were dark, steady, and held a stillness that was unnerving. His name tag read Thorne. Riley rolled down his window, a smirk already playing on his lips, ready to deploy the easy camaraderie of the Brotherhood. "Hey, Trooper, what seems to be the problem?" The trooper, Marcus Thorne, didn't smile back. His gaze was even, his expression unreadable. "Good afternoon, sir. State Trooper Thorne. Do you know how fast you were going?" Riley chuckled, reaching for his wallet. "Look, man, let's just cut to the chase." He pulled out his own badge, the polished silver shield of the City Police Department, and held it up. "Officer Jack Riley, City PD, 12th Precinct. I'm heading home after a long shift. We're on the same team here, right?" He winked, expecting the familiar nod, the sigh of recognition, the "all right, slow it down, brother, have a safe one." It was a script he knew by heart, but Trooper Thorne didn't follow the script. He didn't even glance at the badge for more than a fraction of a second. His eyes remained fixed on Riley's. The silence stretched, thick and heavy in the humid Kentucky air. Thorne's expression didn't change, not a flicker of recognition, not a hint of deference, nothing. He just stood there, a granite statue of duty. Then he spoke again, his voice a low, steady baritone that carried no emotion, only fact. "I asked you a question, sir. Do you know how fast you were going?" Riley's smirk faltered. He lowered the badge, a flicker of disbelief crossing his face. This wasn't supposed to happen. He was a cop. This was a trooper, a highway guy. They were supposed to understand. They were supposed to protect their own. But the man standing outside his window looked like he protected one thing and one thing only, the line painted on the road. And Riley had just flown right over it. The air in the Mustang suddenly felt hotter, more constricting. Riley's collar was too tight. He had played his card, the ace of spades in the world of blue, and Trooper Thorne hadn't even blinked. It was like showing a crucifix to a man who didn't believe in ghosts. Riley's easy confidence began to curdle into something else, something sharper, laced with indignation. "Are you serious right now?" Riley asked, his tone shifting from collegial to confrontational. "I just showed you my shield. I'm a cop." "I'm aware," Thorne said, his voice still a placid lake of calm, "which is why I'm surprised you were doing 95 in a 70. You, of all people, should know the law." The words were simple, direct, yet they landed like stones. There was no anger in Thorne's voice, no judgment, just a quiet, unshakable adherence to the facts. That's what made it worse. It wasn't a power trip. It was an execution of duty so pure it felt like a personal rebuke. Riley's face flushed. "Look, it's called professional courtesy, Trooper. You ever heard of it? We look out for our own. You scratch my back, I scratch yours. That's how this works." Thorne's gaze remained steady. "That's not how this works, sir, not on my highway." He tilted his head slightly. "License and registration, please." It was the second time he'd said it, a polite request that now felt like a command, a reassertion of an authority that Riley thought he could bypass. For a moment, Riley considered refusing, escalating, turning this into a real problem. He could call his captain. He could make this trooper's life difficult. He had options. But something in Thorne's eyes stopped him. It wasn't a threat. It was a certainty. It was the look of a man who had faced down far worse things than a hot-headed city cop with a bruised ego. It was the look of a man who did not bend. With a frustrated grunt, Riley snatched his wallet from the passenger seat and fumbled for his license. He shoved it, along with his registration, into Thorne's outstretched hand. The transaction felt like a surrender. Thorne took the documents and walked back to his cruiser without another word. The silence returned, now filled with the low hum of passing traffic and the furious pounding in Riley's chest. He watched Thorne in his rearview mirror, seeing the trooper sit in his car, a dark silhouette against the bright afternoon sun. This wasn't just a traffic stop anymore. It was a contest of wills, and Jack Riley was beginning to suspect he was profoundly outmatched. He had tried to intimidate a man who seemed immune to intimidation. He had appealed to a brotherhood that, for this trooper, clearly had its limits. The line. And on this long, lonely stretch of highway, there was only one line that mattered. Minutes crawled by, each one stretching into an eternity. Riley sat stewing in his car, the leather seat sticking to his back. He replayed the scene in his head, his anger mounting. Who was this guy? Some rookie trying to make a name for himself. Some holier-than-thou hard ass who got a thrill from writing tickets. He couldn't wrap his head around it. In his world, the badge was a bond. It was a shield not just against the criminals, but against the mundane hassles of civilian life. A speeding ticket was beneath that bond. He saw Thorne on his radio, probably calling it in. The dispatcher would confirm his identity. Officer John Riley, 12th Precinct, active duty. That should be the end of it. The trooper would come back, maybe with a half-hearted warning, the charade of the stop maintained but the unspoken rule honored. Riley held onto that hope, a dwindling ember in the furnace of his fury. Finally, Thorne stepped out of his cruiser and walked back toward the Mustang. He moved with the same unhurried grace, his ticket book now in hand. Riley's heart sank. The book, the damn book. This was really happening. Thorne arrived at the window, his shadow falling over Riley. He didn't speak immediately, just stood there, letting the silence do the work. Riley couldn't take it. "So that's it," he snapped. "You're really going to write me up, after I identified myself?" Thorne looked at him, and for the first time, a flicker of something that wasn't pure neutrality entered his eyes. It wasn't anger, it was disappointment. "You being an officer is the reason I'm writing the ticket, son, not the reason to let you go." "Son," Riley scoffed, the word a fresh insult. "I'm not your son, I'm a brother in blue." A brother who was driving 25 miles per hour over the speed limit. A brother who could have killed someone, Thorne countered, his voice still low but now with an edge of steel. "That badge you flashed, it's not a pass, it's a responsibility. It means we are held to a higher standard, not a lower one. It means we are expected to be the example of the law, not the exception to it. You seem to have forgotten that." Riley was speechless. He was being lectured by a highway patrolman on the side of some God-forsaken road. The humiliation was a physical thing, a hot flush that spread from his neck to his ears. He tried a different angle, a last, desperate play. "You know, my captain is good friends with the state patrol commander. I'm sure he'd be very interested to hear about one of his troopers refusing to extend a professional courtesy." It was a veiled threat, clumsy and weak, and he knew it the second the words left his mouth. Thorne didn't even react. It was as if Riley had said nothing at all. He just continued looking at him with those impossibly steady eyes. Then he clicked his pen. The sound was deafening. "I once pulled over the governor's son," Thorne said, his voice dropping into a near-conversational tone. The shift was so unexpected it threw Riley off balance. "Kid was about your age, driving his daddy's convertible, doing 100 in a 65, flashed his driver's license like it was a royal decree." Thorne paused, his gaze drifting to the horizon for a second, as if replaying the memory. "He made the same arguments you're making, talked about who his father was, made some calls, threatened my job." He looked back at Riley, his eyes locking on him again. "You know what he got?" Riley didn't answer. He didn't want to know. "A speeding ticket," Thorne said, and a lecture on how the name on his license didn't make him any different from the name on the registration of the car he was about to wrap around a tree. "His father, the governor, sent me a letter a week later, thanking me." The story hung in the air between them, a quiet, devastating checkmate. Riley's threats, his appeals to authority, his flashing badge, they all shriveled into insignificance. He wasn't dealing with a rookie. He wasn't dealing with a hard ass. He was dealing with a legend, a man whose integrity was so absolute it had become folklore. A man who had faced down the highest power in the state and hadn't flinched, and Jack Riley had tried to bully him. The thought was so absurd it was almost comical. He felt small, foolish, and utterly powerless. Trooper Thorne looked down at his ticket book, the pen poised to write. The sermon was over. The judgment was at hand. The sun beat down on the roof of the Mustang, turning the car into a sweatbox. But the heat Riley felt had nothing to do with the weather. It was the slow, creeping burn of humiliation. He had no more cards to play, no threats to make. He was just a man in a car on the side of the road, waiting for a piece of paper that would serve as a permanent record of his own arrogance. Thorne's pen began to move across the ticket, the scratching sound a quiet symphony of consequence. He wrote with a steady hand, each letter and number precise, methodical. It wasn't an act of anger, it was an act of process. He was a force of nature, like a river carving its path through stone, indifferent to the rock's protests. Riley couldn't stay silent. The indignity was too much. "You must be real proud of yourself," he muttered, the words sour in his mouth, making a point, sticking it to a city cop. Thorne paused his writing, but he didn't look up. "There's no pride in this, Officer Riley, only duty." He resumed writing. "You think this is about you and me. You think this is some personal contest." He finally looked up. His eyes seemed to pierce right through Riley's bluster and into the shaky core beneath. "This is about the woman you might have run off the road. The family of 4 in the minivan you flew past like they were standing still. It's about every single person on this highway who trusts that the people wearing a badge are the ones keeping them safe, not the ones putting them in danger." He tore the top copy from the ticket book. The sound was sharp, final. "You flashed your badge at me like it was supposed to mean something, and it does. It means you know better." He held the ticket out. Riley stared at it, refusing to take it. Thorne didn't retract his hand. He just waited, his patience a weapon in itself. The moment stretched, a silent standoff. Finally, with a defeated sigh, Riley snatched the ticket from Thorne's hand. "There," Riley spat. "You happy now? You made your point." "I'm not done," Thorne said quietly. Riley's head snapped up. "What?" Thorne was already writing again, this time on a different form. It wasn't another ticket. It was a formal report sheet. "You were speeding. That's a violation. But when you tried to use your position as an officer of the law to intimidate another officer into ignoring that violation, you crossed a different line." Riley's blood ran cold. "What are you doing?" "I'm documenting this interaction," Thorne said calmly. "Your speed, your refusal to acknowledge it, your attempt to leverage your badge for personal gain, your verbal assertion that law enforcement officers should be exempt from the law." He wrote, each word a nail in the coffin of Riley's career. "A copy of the citation and a copy of this report will be sent to your commanding officer at the 12th Precinct, and another copy will be forwarded directly to your department's Internal Affairs Division." It was a kill shot. A speeding ticket was an annoyance, an embarrassment. A formal complaint to IA was a threat. It meant an investigation. It meant a black mark on his record. It meant questions, hearings, and a level of scrutiny that could derail his entire future. All because he couldn't stomach being treated like everyone else. "You can't do that," Riley whispered, the fight completely gone from his voice, replaced by a raw, pleading panic. Thorne stopped writing and looked him dead in the eye. His voice was ice. "I can, and I will. You said it yourself, officer. We're on the same team, and on my team we don't cover for bad behavior. We correct it." He finished the report, tore off the copy, and held it out alongside the speeding ticket. "These are your copies. I suggest you read them carefully. And I suggest you think long and hard about what that shield on your chest is supposed to represent before you ever try to use it as a shield for yourself again." Riley stared at the 2 pieces of paper. They felt heavier than lead. His hand trembled as he took them. He had started this interaction as the one in power, the one with the key. Now he was a man holding the evidence of his own downfall, delivered by a quiet trooper on a lonely highway who had done nothing more than his job. Trooper Thorne gave a single, final nod. It wasn't a gesture of dismissal, but of closure. "Drive safe, Officer Riley," he said, the word officer now carrying an entirely new, ironic weight. He turned and walked back to his cruiser, his back straight, his steps as measured and deliberate as they had been when he first approached. He didn't look back. He didn't need to. The lesson had been delivered. Riley watched him go, the tickets clutched in his hand. The engine of the patrol car started, and with a quiet crunch of gravel, the black and white pulled back onto the highway, merging seamlessly into traffic, a silent guardian resuming his watch. Jack Riley was left alone on the shoulder of the road, the echo of Trooper Thorne's words ringing in his ears. It means we are held to a higher standard. He looked at his own badge, still sitting on the passenger seat. For the first time, it didn't look like a symbol of power. It looked like a burden. A weight he had just proven he wasn't strong enough to carry. He crumpled the tickets in his fist, a wave of impotent rage and profound shame washing over him. He had run into a legend, and the legend had left him in ruins, with nothing but a long, quiet drive home to contemplate the wreckage. The highway stretched out before him, an endless ribbon of asphalt and painted lines. For Trooper Marcus Thorne, it was more than a road. It was a sanctuary, a place of clean lines and clear rules. He drove, his eyes scanning the horizon, his mind already moved on from the encounter with Officer Riley. It wasn't personal. It was never personal. It was procedural. A deviation from the code had been observed and it had been corrected. That was the beginning and the end of it. He thought of the governor's letter, the one he kept in a lockbox at home. It didn't thank him for his bravery or his strength. It thanked him for his consistency. In a world of shifting politics and situational ethics, the governor had written, it is reassuring to know there are still men like you who believe the line is the line for everyone. That was the core of it. The line, it wasn't a thing to be crossed or bent. It was a covenant, a promise he made every morning when he put on the uniform and pinned the badge over his heart. That badge wasn't his. It belonged to the people. He was just its temporary custodian, charged with honoring its meaning. Officer Riley and men like him saw the badge as a key to a private club, one with special privileges and exemptions. Thorne saw it as a key to a public trust, one that once broken was nearly impossible to repair. His radio crackled, a call about an overturned truck a few miles ahead. He acknowledged it, his voice calm and steady, and increased his speed, the engine humming in response. He was moving toward the next problem, the next duty. The incident with Riley was already fading, another small, necessary course correction in a long career of them. But for Jack Riley, the moment was branded into his soul. The drive home was the longest of his life. Every passing car felt like an accusation. Every police cruiser he saw in the distance made his stomach clench. He walked into his apartment and threw the crumpled tickets on the kitchen counter, the pieces of paper a monument to his folly. 2 days later, he was called into his captain's office. The report from Trooper Thorne was on the desk. His captain, a man Riley had once looked up to, looked at him with an expression of deep, weary disappointment. There were no shouts, no grand speeches. Just a quiet conversation about duty, honor, and the responsibility that comes with the badge. Riley was placed on administrative leave pending an internal affairs investigation. His gun and shield were taken. Stripped of his authority, he was just a man, left to confront the arrogance that had led him here. He never became a cautionary tale taught at the academy. His story was quieter than that, a ripple in the vast ocean of law enforcement, but the ripple changed him. He returned to the force months later, a different man, humbled, quieter, his swagger replaced by a heavy, thoughtful caution. He never used his badge as a pass again, and out on the highways of Kentucky, Trooper Marcus Thorne continued his patrol. He was a silent guardian, a man of few words and unshakable principle. Most drivers who flew past him saw only a patrol car, a nameless, faceless symbol of the law. They had no idea they were passing a legend. They didn't know they were in the presence of a man who believed that integrity was the only line that could never be crossed. He just kept driving, his gaze fixed on the horizon, ensuring the road was safe for everyone. Because for some men, the duty is not a job. It is the road itself, and it has no end.